Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Sebastian Vettel, Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc. What do these drivers all have in common? They've all finished a Formula 1 season 4th over the last decade or so. But of course none of these drivers then lost their place in Formula 1 for the following year. The driver currently placed to join them on that list looks like he just might. The 2020 season has been Sergio Perez's best in F1, yet he's found himself frozen out, and barring late salvation from Red Bull, he'll not be on the grid next year and may never be again. It's a situation that F1 sporting boss Ross Brawn has labelled a tragedy, and before we tell you why we emphatically agree with that statement, welcome back to all of our subscribers and hello to anyone viewing for the first time. If you like what you see, think about hitting the big red button. How good has Perez been? Perez has developed a reputation as a solid midfield driver who is exceptionally good at grasping exceptional opportunities, hence his record of 9 podium finishes despite never previously driving for a team that finished higher than 4th in the Constructors' Championship. However, blessed with the fortune of driving the RP20, Perez has finally been given a car consistently good enough to be best of the rest, and that's allowed him to show just how strong a driver he's turned himself into. He says he's at his peak in terms of experience, understanding and team communication, and that has manifested itself in some exceptional numbers that underline why he's 4th in the championship and among the very best performers of 2020. His excellent return this year starts with an ability to bank points. Among the full-time entrants, only Lewis Hamilton can match his 100% point scoring record this season, as Perez has finished in the top 10 at every race he started. Counting the 2 that he missed with COVID-19 seems a little bit unfair. However, this all gets undermined by critics who say that Perez is simply doing what he should, given Racing Point's had the 3rd fastest car over the course of the season. Quite why that's a criticism is mystery to us, but let's roll with it. With one Red Bull seriously underperforming, then by rights the leading Racing Point driver should be 4th in the championship, and Perez is. That's justification of his ability in itself. What's even more impressive is that he's 4th despite missing those 2 races and losing a lot of points in others through no fault of his own. Considering Racing Point's performance advantage was bigger in the first part of the season, with Renault and subsequently Ferrari offering renewed threats as the championship has progressed, it's to Perez's enormous credit that he's been able to establish himself as the leading Class B force. Eliminating the 2 Silverstone races to bring every other driver to Perez's level of participation reinforces the job he's done this year. He's also done that despite at least 3 races in which bigger points hauls have been snatched from him. Spa and Imola, where the team's strategy let him down, and Monza, where he was massively unfortunate with the race's safety car and red flag period. So he should not only be 4th in the championship, but a clear 4th, a result that would be just reward for an excellent season. It's one in which he's partially combated an underlying qualifying weakness as well. Perez does not have the reputation of a Saturday star. He's much more effective in race trim, particularly as his inbuilt traction control, as Racing Point has previously characterised his feel for managing tyre slip, is perfectly suited to the challenges of modern F1. However, there's a lot more to Perez than just a driver who's kind on his tyres. This year he's seen off Stroll in qualifying 8-3 and been beaten only once in dry conditions. And he boasts the 4th best qualifying average of everybody after a season in which the team with the 3rd fastest car has fluctuated depending on the circuit. Racing Point, McLaren, Renault, Ferrari and AlphaTauri have all had their turns leading that fight, but Perez is the driver with the superior record, one that even best Red Bull driver Albon's. Despite unfortunate setbacks like in Belgium and Italy, or spinning on the opening lap in Portugal after a 50-50 move on Max Verstappen, Perez still has the best average finishing position among the midfield as well. He shades Charles Leclerc in that department, despite Leclerc being flattered slightly by retirements in the Styrian and Italian GPs, which would have likely yielded lower points finishes at best. So how's he ended up frozen out? The tale of woe that is Perez being shunted out of Racing Point, a team that he's been a cornerstone of for several years dating back to its former identity as Force India, is well known. Performance counts for little if you're neither the boss's son with a watertight contract or a 4-time world champion who has too much pedigree to ignore ahead of the team's transformation to Aston Martin. Perez, despite thinking he had a deal in place for 2021 and preparing to enjoy the career opportunity he's waited a long time for, has subsequently been cast into a situation of great doubt. If Red Bull opts to axe Albon and Perez, not Nico Hulkenberg, is considered to be the best choice to replace him, then it will be a very worthy reprieve. But the alternative is not just the blow of failing to escape the midfield, it's that Perez could be out of F1 altogether. Brawn says that would be a tragedy, and he's right, as much as something involving a man no longer earning a living racing F1 cars can satisfy that definition. But it would be a ridiculous and sorry state of affairs. When the doubt over Perez's future intensified, he appeared to have options at Alfa Romeo, Haas and Williams in addition to holding out for Red Bull, and on merit alone, he would command a drive at any of those teams, no questions asked. Those teams' respective circumstances meant they would not move for Perez though. And if Perez can't bank a seat as a driver with consistency, speed and strong financial backing in his favour, then there must be precious few on the grid whose futures are truly in their own hands. A huge injustice. It sounds like an exaggeration to say it, but Perez faces an injustice not seen to this degree in modern F1, if ever before. Drivers like Paul di Resta and Hulkenberg slipped out of the midfield before their time, and Red Bull juniors like Sebastian Buemi and Jean-Eric Vergne never got picked up once dropped by their employer. But none of those drivers or any other in the midfield have really put together the package of work that Perez has. There's little point going into the teammate war too much, given the argument that Perez deserves a racing point seat more than Stroll is well established. In fact, here's one we made earlier. On average, Perez starts and finishes a place higher than Stroll, and he'll end the year with a superior head-to-head qualifying record and more points. There's no convincing argument that Perez is not a faster or more reliable driver than Stroll, even if Stroll clearly has potential and may well develop into a driver of or beyond Perez's level eventually. The tougher argument is which drivers in F1's midfield are really better than this version of Perez. Aside from the obvious candidates like Leclerc and Ricciardo, it's difficult to identify a clearly superior all-round driver. That places him on a similar level to Carlos Sainz Jr. and Pierre Gasly, and if either of those drivers were frozen out of Formula 1, there would be uproar. The only silver lining in all this is that Perez is heading to the exit door after a season in which he's been able to prove his worth and has. But even that's bittersweet because it shows why he was so deserving of the opportunity Aston seemed to represent, being part of a project that fought at the front of the grid. Perez hasn't had that chance before, even though people tried to use his McLaren move in 2013 to cut him down. That was at the start of McLaren's decline, and judging Perez's suitability for a top team on that season as a 23-year-old F1 third-year driver is unfair. There remains a small chance he will get that opportunity. Being pushed out of Racing Point only to end up at Red Bull would be a very satisfying twist, and should that happen, few could argue that Red Bull trading Albon for Perez would be a downgrade, especially in the short term. But the evidence screaming against Perez being overlooked has been there barely below the surface for quite some time, and his fate depends on a team like Red Bull having a full understanding of the calibre of driver that's available. So Perez, more than anybody else, knows the value of ramming home the level he's operating at, just like he did with his podium at Istanbul. But even he admitted the rest is not in his hands. Do you think Perez deserves a place on the F1 grid? And if so, where would you put him? Or is there another driver you feel got shunted out of F1 too soon? Let us know in the comments and give this video a thumbs up if you think we've explained Perez's situation well, even if you're not a fan of him being given the cold shoulder. Then make sure you're subscribed to the race to check out more of our videos in the future.